All right, so today we're going to really dig into Oracle Financial Services Software.
OFSS.
Yeah, OFSS, they put out a couple of press releases recently, two, right on January 15th, 2025, and we're going to go through those releases and kind of pull out some of the interesting
The insights.
the insights. Yeah, the interesting insights. Uh what do these numbers mean for the future of the company?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing when you look at these releases is that, at least at first glance, they seem a bit contradictory, right?
Yeah, how so?
Well, we see very strong performance over the 9 months leading up to December 2024. But then when we look at the third quarter itself, it appears a little bit more subdued.
Yeah, well, let's put some numbers to that. For the 9 months, they're showing revenue of 5,131 crore rupees, up 8% year over year.
Right,
Operating income is even better, up 14% to 2,250 crore rupees.
right.
But then Q3 hits, and revenue's down 6% compared to a year ago, and operating income is down 17%.
Yeah, so that's the rub, right? How do we make sense of that?
Right.
Well, it's important to remember that quarterly results aren't always this smooth upward trajectory, right?
Yeah.
The CFO of OFSS, Avadhut Ketkar, he actually points this out in one of the releases where he uses this term nonlinearity of quarterly results,
Mm-hmm.
which is just a fancy way of saying that things can jump around a bit.
Right. Right.
And so seasonality in the financial services industry can be a factor,
Sure.
and also the timing of when large deals close.
Right. So maybe some of the large deals that might have closed in Q3 got bumped up to an earlier quarter.
It's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible, yeah. So Q3 looks a little bit weaker by comparison, but I think the key takeaway here is that despite that little blip in Q3, OFSS is still indicating that its operating parameters are quite strong.
Okay.
And Mr. Ketkar again emphasizes this in the release where he talks about he highlights their 44% operating margin for the 9 months,
That's significant.
which is up from 42% a year earlier.
So that's good. A little bit of reassurance for investors. Let's talk about some of these growth drivers that are mentioned in the press release. I see a couple of quotes here.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about marquee wins and a strong uptick in cloud deployment.
Right.
So OFSS is really riding that cloud wave effectively.
Absolutely, they are. And if we look at the numbers for the 9 months ending December 2024, we see that their license and cloud revenue grew by 20% year over year.
Wow.
And then support revenue, which is an important part of their business, was up 9%.
So what's the takeaway there?
Well, the takeaway is that OFSS is putting a lot of emphasis on cloud-based solutions, and that aligns perfectly with where the financial services industry is headed these days.
It's a smart move for sure.
It is a smart move, yeah. They're not just keeping up with this shift to the cloud. It seems like they're trying to lead it,
Yeah.
which is a good position to be in.
And I think one of the things that really caught my eye in these press releases were some of the specific wins that they're talking about.
Yeah, they talk about some interesting deals.
Yeah. One of them, I think they mentioned a major U.S. credit union that's choosing Oracle banking payments, and
It's huge,
that is a big deal. And
especially in a market like the U.S.,
absolutely, yeah.
which is a key market for them.
Yeah.
So, they're clearly having success in penetrating that market, but it's not just about new clients.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about, expanding existing relationships. And they give another example in one of the releases of a U.S.-based bank that's expanding its use of Oracle products to support its international growth.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that speaks to the scalability and the adaptability of OFSS solutions.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then there's this Romanian financial services group that's upgrading its Oracle systems, which kind of shows you that modernization is an ongoing need
It is.
in this sector. And this one I think is particularly interesting. It talks about Piraeus Bank in Greece going live with Oracle transaction banking on a multi-cloud platform.
Now, that's a great example
That's impressive.
because you're talking about a major financial institution choosing OFSS for a very complex multi-cloud deployment.
Yeah, it shows they can handle the complex stuff.
Absolutely, and for big players.
So, we've got a mix here of new clients,
Mhm.
expansions, and these really complex deployments across all different kinds of institutions and geographies.
Absolutely.
So I think that these wins are pretty impressive. But I also want to look at the financial details behind all of this.
Sure.
And we're going to dive into those financial statements next and see what those numbers tell us.
All right, let's unpack those numbers.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the details of these financials. What can we learn from these unaudited, consolidated, and standalone financials?
Well, one of the first things that kind of jumps out at me when I look at these statements is the basic earnings per share.
EPS.
Yeah, the EPS.
Yeah.
And we see that it's down 27% year over year for the third quarter. But if we zoom out and look at the 9 months, it's actually up 4%.
Okay.
So again, it's kind of a mixed bag, right? Similar to what we saw with the top line figures.
Yeah, it's all about perspective.
It is. It is.
Short-term blip versus long-term trend.
Exactly.
And I'm seeing here that products revenue is still the dominant force,
Right.
making up about 91% of the total revenue.
Yeah. And that's consistent with their core business, right? They're a software powerhouse.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they make most of their money.
Sure.
Now, if we look at the geographic revenue breakdown, it shows that OFSS is truly a global player.
Yeah, the U.S. is a big market for them, but they're also pulling in revenue from Europe, Asia Pacific, the Middle East, Africa.
Right. And that diversification is a strength.
Yeah.
It helps to mitigate risk.
Yeah.
Right? By not being overly reliant on any single market.
It makes sense. Let's switch gears a little bit, talk about some of the employee metrics that were included in that supplemental operating metrics section.
Sure.
I know this is something you're always interested in.
Always. I love to look at those numbers.
So, they give us some info on employee count and attrition rate. What's the story there?
Yeah, well, it's important to look at those numbers in context, right?
Yeah,
The tech job market has been pretty volatile
it has.
the last few years, but if we look at OFSS specifically, their employee count has remained relatively stable over the past year.
Okay.
It's hovered around 8,700 to 8,900.
Yeah.
And the attrition rate's bounced around a bit, but generally it's been in that 10% to 12% range.
Which is pretty good considering, how competitive the market is.
It is. It suggests that they're doing a good job of holding onto their talent even amidst all that competition.
So we've really gone through these press releases. We've gone through the financial statements. We've pulled out some key numbers. If we were to step back now and look at the big picture, what's the takeaway here? What should we understand about Oracle Financial Services Software?
Well, I think it's clear that they're in a strong position overall. They're clearly capitalizing on this boom in cloud computing in the financial services space.
Yeah.
And that's driving some pretty impressive growth.
Yeah.
But like any company, they're facing challenges, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to juggle their short-term performance goals with their long-term vision.
Right, trying to deliver today, but also set themselves up for success tomorrow.
Exactly. And that Q3 dip might raise some eyebrows.
Yeah.
But I think it's crucial to look at the bigger picture, right?
Mm.
Their 9-month performance is excellent.
Yeah.
And they're racking up some significant wins.
Yeah.
Like that Piraeus Bank deal in Greece.
Yeah, no, those are all really good signs. But I'm wondering, as we look ahead, what would you say is the biggest challenge facing OFSS?
I think the biggest challenge for any company in this space, and especially for OFSS, is staying ahead of the curve.
Right.
Fintech is just incredibly dynamic.
It is.
New players are popping up constantly, and even the big tech giants, they're trying to muscle their way into financial services.
Mm-hmm.
So OSSS can't just be, good at what they do now. They have to be able to anticipate what's coming next.
Right. So it's not just about riding the current wave. They got to be looking for the next one.
Exactly. They need to be investing heavily in research and development.
Yeah.
Exploring emerging technologies like AI, machine learning, even blockchain, and maybe even more importantly, they need to nurture their talent.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's people who drive innovation.
Yeah. They've got to build for the future.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about everything we've discussed, all this data, if we zoom out, what's the one big takeaway you want to leave folks with about OFSS?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that they are at a really crucial point.
Hmm.
They've got a solid foundation. They've got a clear strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But the industry that they operate in is undergoing this massive transformation.
Yeah.
And the decisions that they make over the next few years are really going to determine whether they remain a leader in fintech or get left behind.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful statement. It really puts things into perspective. We've gone from, just looking at numbers to really understanding the bigger forces at play here. Mm-hmm. This has been a really interesting deep dive.
It has.
So for folks listening who want to keep learning more about OFSS, where would you point them?
Well, I would start with their own website. They have a ton of information on their products and their services, what they're doing in the market.
Yeah, for sure. And are there any industry publications or resources that you would recommend to kind of stay on top of the broader trends in financial technology?
Absolutely. There are a lot of great resources out there,
Mm.
publications like The Banker,
Okay.
FinTech Futures,
Mm-hmm.
American Banker. Those are all excellent sources of analysis and insight.
Yeah, they'll give you the broad perspective.
Yeah, on everything from, regulatory changes to
Mm-hmm.
the latest tech advancements.
Awesome. I'll check those out. I know you always like to leave our listeners with something to think about. So,
Hmm.
as we wrap up today, what's that final thought, that pearl of wisdom?
Well, I think as we've seen, the financial services industry is really being reshaped by technology in some pretty fundamental ways.
For sure.
And this raises a pretty crucial question.
Okay.
What role do we, as individuals, as a society, want technology to play in our financial lives?
That's a big question.
It's a huge question.
It's a question with a lot of different facets to it.
It does.
Convenience, security, access, control.
Yeah, exactly. And there are no easy answers.
Right.
But it's a conversation that I think we need to be having because the decisions we make today are going to shape the financial landscape of tomorrow. So I encourage everyone to really engage in this dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
explore the possibilities,
Mm-hmm.
and demand solutions that really align with their values and aspirations.
I love that. That's a great call to action. So we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We started with this basic understanding of Oracle Financial Services Software's recent performance,
Mhm.
and we've really dug into, the challenges and opportunities that they face.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey.
It has been, and thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive and for sharing your expertise.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been great having you, and to everyone listening, knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
The more informed we are, the better equipped we are to really navigate this complex world of finance and make choices that empower us.
Couldn't agree more.
So on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that matters to you.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.